and welcome to Mulling in His Own Stupidity Series 2 with me, Dave Mullen. Those of you who watched Series 1, all 20 of you, will be aware that I lost my job at a primary school due to a pocket-sized misdemeanor. So, seeing as no other school will hire me, I've taken to YouTube to educate the masses and myself in another series of Mulling in His Own Stupidity. The series is going to be a little bit different from Series 1. This series I'm going to take a specific topic each week, learn as much as I can about that topic, and then put it all together and tell you everything I've learned in one shortish video that should be published every week from now until I get another job. The topic for this week is, drum roll please, comedy. You guessed it, it's in the title. This is a comedy channel after all, and I am supposed to be a comedian. First I thought, what am I going to do? Just read the Wikipedia article on comedy, and that's kind of where I started. I read the Encyclopedia Britannica article on comedy and the history of comedy, and it was really interesting. But in the end I found so much more stuff. There was way more than I was expecting. Journal articles, research papers, online books. There's entire labs and university departments dedicated to the study of humour. It was actually quite fruitful. Everything I read will be linked in the blog post below. So without further ado, here's what I learned. Just a little disclaimer before we continue. I am by no means an authority on any of the topics discussed in this video or any other videos that I make. These videos are not a replacement for school or your own study, okay? So stay in school, or if you're an adult and you still live at home like me, then just give up. We're going to start with the definition. The definition of comedy is anything with a happy ending. Traditionally it would be a drama or a narrative poem. Basically comedy was distinct from tragedy. You had the two extremes, comedy and tragedy. Tragedy starts in order and descends into chaos. Comedy starts in chaos but then offers a way out. Nowadays the two are more interchangeable. There's not as much of a distinction, but traditionally that was the distinction, and that's the definition, is comedy is something with a happy ending, a good ending. Origins of the word comedy comes from Middle English, which comes from French, comédie. That comes via Latin from Greek. The word is komoidos, which means comic poet. Komoidos is a combination of two words, komos, which means revel, and aoidos, which means singer. This is where it gets interesting, because komos is a fertility god associated with perpetual rejuvenation. He's basically the god of festivity, revelry, and nocturnal dalliances. He was also the son of Dionysus, who's my favourite god. I would argue the god of comedy. He's officially the god of wine and ritual madness. He carries around a staff with a pine cone on the end called a thyrsus, which looks weirdly like a microphone. He has the power to create ecstasy, and in his rituals the phallus was prominent. So there are basically three more traditional theories about the purpose of comedy, why we laugh, what makes us laugh, and there's one more modern scientific theory that I'll talk about in a bit. But the first of the three more traditional theories is the relief or release theory. Other people have written about it, but it's mainly associated with Freud. He actually thought there was a build-up of psychic energy that needed to be released. Of course, because it's Freud, it's all related to the id and the superego. He believed that comedy was the id, the rebellious id, getting its way over the superego. The superego is telling us, no, don't do that, don't say that, do this, do that. The id saying, I'm going to do what I want. And this is interesting if you think back to the festivals, a kind of carnival related to those gods that we spoke about earlier. The idea of carnival being the normal rules don't apply, everyone gets to go crazy and have fun, get it all out of their system, and then we go back to normal. Maybe you could think of comedy as like a mini carnival. The comedians talking about things that they shouldn't, they're breaking social norms, or at least talking about them and saying how silly are these, everyone's having a good laugh, getting it out of their system, and then going back to normal. So it's a release. Okay, so the second theory is the superiority theory, basically put forward by Hobbes, Aristotle, Plato. It says that we use comedy, humor, laughter to assert our superiority over others. We can't use violence, so we use jokes to say, I'm better than you. I don't really like this theory. I think it's very narrow. Of course, there are certain types of comedy or jokes that do that, but there's so many examples of when jokes like that backfire and make the person who told them look inferior. So, I don't know. It has led to some interesting research. There was one study I read where they looked at different groups and they analysed their laughter and found that the more dominant individuals had a different type of laughter. The people in positions of power had a more dominant laugh, which was quite interesting. There was another guy who basically decided to ride a unicycle around town, noticed that he was getting a lot of comments and noticed that men in particular were making fun of him, so he decided to record all of the responses he got to his unicycle. All the jokes that the guys make are basically, where's the other wheel, couldn't afford the other wheel, did you leave it in the car? And this guy basically claims that this shows comedy is related to male hormonal aggression, but I think he was just bitter that he was getting the piss taken out of him. Next theory is the incongruity theory. Incongruity, put forward by Kant and Schopenhauer. It says that we laugh at the incongruous when we all have these pretensions, we all think of ourselves in a certain way and try and act in a certain way, but really underneath it all we're all the same, we're all animals. And the comedian pulls back the veil, tells it like it really is. We all laugh at how ridiculous we all are with all our pretensions. This theory is related to satire. Obviously satire is poking fun at the powerful and the rich, with all their pretensions and images of themselves, and we're kind of poking fun at them and saying, look at you're how ridiculous you are. You're just the same as us, really. The last theory is a more modern scientific theory called benign violation theory. It's very interesting. They've got a whole website you can go and look at. They've got some circles and a diagram. Benign violation is something like tickling, where it's a threat but it's benign. So they claim that humour and laughter evolved as a threat response. If we can imagine, probably laughter came before language. So when we were living in a tribe and we thought there was a threat, but then it turned out there wasn't, we would laugh to say, ha ha ha, it's not a threat, don't worry about it. A helpful example for me would be like the fart, because maybe the fart originally would be like, oh, has he shat himself? That would be bad. That would stink up the whole camp for ages. But turns out he's just farted, so it's benign. It's a benign violation. Easy to explain why we find edgy humour funny, because it's on the edge of a threat. It's like, oh, is this guy going to go there? And then he pulls back and it turns out it's benign. They also use it to explain why after a big tragedy, there's a particular amount of time that needs to pass before you can joke about it. They literally have done studies on it and found that it's about 36 days. That's because if it's too close to the tragedy, then it's still a threat. And if it's too far away, it's too benign, everyone's forgotten about it. But in that sweet spot, it's like, it's a benign violation. It's like on the edge. They also say this is why in comedy clubs it helps to be literally physically on the edge. That's why, you know, if you've ever performed in a comedy club full of sofas, everyone's too relaxed, they're not on edge enough, but it actually helps to have them on hard chairs and on the edge of their seats, because there needs to be a bit of that tension, there needs to be a bit of that fear in the air. I heard, I think it was Nikki Glaser talking about this on a Joe Rogan podcast. I don't know where she got it from, but apparently stage fright comes from, you know, when we were cavemen, the only time you'd be in a situation standing in front of a crowd about to be judged would be if you're about to get kicked out of the tribe or something. And this kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because they're judging you going, is this guy a threat? Then you're telling them a joke, they're laughing and all agreeing, he's okay, don't worry about it. We'll let him stay. It also relates to the social element of comedy. So there's so many studies on how important it is to be laughing in a group. You know, when you're sitting on your own, you're much less likely to laugh out loud. That's why they started putting canned laughter on TV, because even though you know it's kind of fake, it still helps a little bit make you feel like you're in a crowd. Such a social thing, because, I mean, this would explain it, we're all almost communicating with each other through laughter. And that's why it helps to be packed together tight in a comedy club. So there's science to back up the fact that Zoom gigs aren't very good. Some extra things I found interesting when I was reading. Well, one was I was listening to Joe Rogan, and there was this neuroscientist talking about how when you're in a group working towards something hard and then someone tells a joke, everyone gets a dopamine kick, and it actually allows you to work harder. And I read a study where they showed this, they demonstrated this. They gave everyone a really boring, mundane task. They showed some people Mr. Bean clips. They showed some people like nature clips or whatever, and some or inspirational clips, and they showed some people some really boring office videos. And then they gave them a really hard task, and the people who had watched Mr. Bean worked harder and longer on the second task than the other two groups. Shows you how important comedians are and laughter is in the office. So why won't anyone hire me? The Mr. Bean related study, I was reading a book about comedy and health. They showed that comedy can help with erectile dysfunction. Basically, again, they took like 3 groups. I think they were suffering from erectile dysfunction, all of them. They showed some of them like Mr. Bean best bits. They showed some of them some other film, a rom-com or something, and then they showed another group a documentary. The ones who watched Mr. Bean went home and had sex, basically. So the power of Mr. Bean is incredible. In putting all this together, you could basically get a very good, you know, pickup technique. See a woman in a bar, you go up to her, you laugh in her face to show that you're not a threat. Make sure your laugh is a kind of dominant laugh. Then you tell her you've been watching Mr. Bean, so you're horny and ready to go all night. And if she's still not interested, then just start tickling her. But yeah, that's what I learnt. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Make sure you share with your mum, like, subscribe, and I'll see you maybe not next week, but the week after with another topic to mull over. in my own stupidity. See you later.